I sure wish I could see all of you. Kind of can. Thank you for being here. I'm Joe Mall. I'm the executive director of the McKenzie River Trust. And I want to thank you for filling this hall tonight for another conversation among people and rivers and community and place. Let's begin by recognizing some of the people here who makes this evening possible. I'm not going to be able to see you, but could the staff and board of the McKenzie River Trust stand, please? I work with truly blessed. And tonight comes to you with some financial support from a recent board member, Linda Karrin, and her husband, Doug. Thank you, Doug and Linda. Judith Sparks is here, I believe, tonight. She created these beautiful artwork here hanging behind us, the silk screens. Once again, we have Kelly Copland and Kyle Cottrell, who will be helping with skills and creativity to bring the language of these words into signing. And somewhere out there, Jeremy Nissel of J. Michael Books has copies of all of Robert Macfarlane's works. Robert will be signing books after tonight's event in the Cole Gallery. And as always, our thanks and admiration for Ginevra and Jim Ralph and all the entire staff and volunteer team here at the Shedd Institute for the Arts. They pour their hearts into this place that welcomes gatherings of people for so many reasons. Thank you. So if you've had some time with your program, there's a QR code in there. Don't play with it now, but after everything's over, if you haven't, please go to that. And then we have a little raffle to raffle off, I think, a river trip with me and some other things going on. So we just want to have more people connect with us out in the field. Do that afterwards, because now's the time when I'd like you to really put that phone away, put it on airplane mode, turn it off. I know it's tempting to take photos and video and things, but I have to tell you, even when you can't see it too much, it's a distraction for people up here, and so I really would appreciate if you could do that. Apple, Google, they aren't going to miss us for 90 minutes, so appreciate you doing that. And I know if those of you that have spent any time with Robert's works, you're going to be looking for that thesaurus in the dictionary and the language he uses, but let's do that after the event, please. So to begin this evening, I want you to do something that was a little out of character, perhaps, in a place like this. I want you to just be as quiet as possible. See if you can focus your attention, your hearing, your feelings, about 45 miles directly west of us. Hear that? You feel it? That's what Robert refers to as the sluicing action of the tide. That sound is a river being drawn out from a wetland on an ebb tide, heading out toward the sea. Its height is currently measured at about 3 feet near Cushman on the Siuslaw River. And according to the charts, it'll drop to a low of 2.74 feet when we're exiting tonight. It's leaving saturated ground now known as Hait Iktatu. This is a place that was known for many years as the Weight Ranch, after the family that operated a dairy there for much of the 20th century. Salmon anglers in the area might know this as the dairy hole for that same reason. Many of you helped McKenzie River Trust acquire this land in 2010. We and many others had kept an eye on it as farming became more and more difficult because the land was subsiding and the markets for milk changed. For us, it looked like a great opportunity to let the river and the tidal flows back into it, to go from growing cattle to growing salmon and flatfish and many other delectable and wondrous coastal creatures. We would do that by pulling out a tide gate and removing a portion of the levee that had kept the river from reaching those historic wetlands except in large floods. A couple of years back, we began referring to it as Haichiktatu, after the creative work by members of the Confederated Tribe of Kus, Lower-Umpqua, and Sayusla Indians, who saw in an aerial outline of the property an image very much like the bump out on the prow of one of their traditional canoes, a heart, or haich, in the Iktatu, or Great River, the Sayusla. Just last Friday, as you got to see as you were sitting down, after years of habitat restoration planning, funding, and earth-moving work led by the tribes and by the Sayusla Watershed Council, that all reached a climax. With a few bites of a really impressive set of Tonka toys, the incoming tide was welcomed back into what had once been a rich spruce and crabapple swamp. For those now nearly 200 acres, once again, they breathe in and out the mixed fresh and salt water and all who ride it 4 times a day. In his book, Is a River Alive?, Robert refers to a river's coursing to the sea in this way. It surges seaward, gravity at work, or something like longing. I and a handful of others from McKenzie River Trust, the Watershed Council, and the tribes stood awestruck. Among the determined equipment operators, all of us lucky enough to witness the return of flow to the wetland interior. And I can tell you, when that water swelled inward, longing was indeed what I felt. People often describe those of us working in land and water conservation as being driven by passion, and I think that's true. But somehow the sense of longing seems more apt. We long for wholeness and connection among land, water, and people. And that longing keeps the fires glowing in our bellies and in our hearts. We see land and rivers that have been broken up, confined, fragmented, worked hard like organic machines. We bring technical smarts and muscle and sweat and dollars and good sense to repair and heal some of those places. Remember what Linus said to poor Charlie Brown about his sad little Christmas tree? I never thought it was such a bad little tree. It's not really bad at all. Maybe it just needs a little love. We're able to do this work finally because our passion and our longing are grounded in love. And we find people like you who share that commitment and to help care for these places. And we do so while dreaming about our grandchildren's grandchildren, loving and working with them 80 years from now, just as we do today. Tonight, we once again will explore that connection between the work we do and the stories that we tell about it. For years, we have borrowed the language of living rivers to talk about that flow, connections to the land, the meanders that happen with channels, the seasonal swell and retreat across floodplains, the deepest reaches of the river, and the tallest heights of the cottonwoods that drink from the subsurface flow, and the columns of aquatic insects that carry the river dozens and dozens of meters into the air. Rivers are certainly alive for McKenzie River Trust. And we do what we can to enliven them in the hearts and minds of people we meet, like you here tonight. You know McKenzie River Trust is an action-oriented organization. And if you don't yet, I hope you will soon. I hope you'll join us in the field. Tonight we bring you a conversation with yet another muse-blessed artist who thinks and writes deeply about people, land, water, and the places we make among them. Robert Macfarlane has devoted his life to the collection and retelling of stories from the paths and hills across the world, from the coasts and islands of Britain to the peaks of the Himalaya and beyond. Like the dear friend who kicked off this series years ago, Barry Lopez, Robert delves into that tension between wanting to stay close and know your home intimately and the desire to travel and encounter such people and places across the world. For those of you just encountering his work, I encourage you to go back in time to his earlier books, especially The Old Ways, where he draws on other travelers and traveled paths to consider that modern tension, as he describes it, between mobility and displacement on one hand and dwelling and belonging on another. After his reading and speaking, he'll be joined on stage by our own Eugene mayor, Karrin Knudson, who lives that tension every day as she joyfully grapples with the challenges of inspiring a city that keeps residents, draws visitors, and stays whole despite those many footprints. The impacts of footprints, both literal and otherwise, are certainly on all of our minds lately. Maybe some of you heard or read that interview between Ezra Klein and Naomi Klein maybe 2 months ago, in which they recognized that we'd been using bloodless, soulless language of carbon to talk about loss and longing in the environment. And the implication was instead to nurture a reconnection with the familiar natural world, perhaps starting with the birds and bees and trees and dandelions of our own backyards. Couldn't agree more with that. That's our business at the McKenzie River Trust, giving you ways to connect with the land. Sometimes we do that carrying around books by Robert and others. Robert has a brand new book out, co-produced with illustrator Jackie Morris, The Book of Birds, something that he describes as not really a way to identify birds, but a way to identify with birds. We have some copies, I believe, outside if they haven't all sold out. They'll certainly touch in their conversations on the book he released 1.5 years ago, Is a River Alive? That underlying idea, the Associated Rights of Nature movement, inspired a citizens' initiative right here in Lane County, the Watershed Bill of Rights. It gave us all an opportunity to consider what it would mean to govern ourselves with more restraint around land and water. It is not an easy proposition, as was seen in the results, and it will take our most curious, compassionate, and forgiving selves to have those conversations productively. And in the meantime, we at McKenzie River Trust and our partners will continue the work of land and water care. Here too, Robert's stories strike home with me. In this case, I think of a conversation he recounts in this newest Is a River Alive, that book, around a campfire with his traveling partner, Wayne, who I believe is in the audience tonight. Wayne expressed a bit of skepticism. It strikes me as both insufficient and fraught with the risk of ventriloquizing, to speak on behalf of a river. Better by far to help the river do as it will, in my opinion, either directly or on its behalf, or else by protecting a context in which it is able to do its own thing, however inexplicably. Protecting a context in which it is able to do its own thing, however inexplicably. Isn't that what we do? There's a lot of juice in that apple. I hear that and think, yeah, that is what we do. Protecting a context in which the river, nature, a bear, an otter, a dragonfly, a sedge, is able to do its own thing, however inextricably. What a marvelous idea. You can read of Robert's long and growing list of books and other accomplishments in many places. For tonight, I'll just note one bit of biography, especially relevant to us here at the outflow of the McKenzie River. Robert's home ground is a region of England known for its chalk, or calcite geology. Chalk ground is quite permeable, so rainwaters filter down into the earth until they meet a more hardened surface and then reemerge as springs, cold, clear, spring-fed streams. Certainly the rock is different, but that hydrology is not completely unlike our aquifer here on the McKenzie, where water percolates through the high cascades and reemerges at Clear Lake and Roaring Springs and other sources that feed our rivers. The rock is different, or obsidians and volcanic basalts and such, rather than his chalk and calcite. But the action is the same, as is the magic of water emerging as a spring, as is the vulnerability of those areas and the responsibility we have to ensure that we won't overtax them, but care for them forever. Let's get to work on that together. Please join me in welcoming a writer who walks, thinks, and expresses those ideas beautifully about the landscapes underfoot and in our minds. Robert Macfarlane.
Sorry, that was a bit like pantomime where I suddenly appeared behind him. He's behind you! Good night. Not good night, Eugene. Good evening, Eugene. Hi, folks. How you doing? Thank you, Joe. Thank you for that mighty welcome, that huge-hearted introduction to me, to Rivers, to this evening. It's a joy and an honor to be here tonight, plainly put. I am very grateful to you all for coming inside into the dark to hear me talk about the outside. I understand I'm in competition this evening with the big yellow guy in the sky. I was in Washington State until recently, and they said, "Oh, you're going to Oregon." Well, we enjoy temperature in the 80s all year round and clear blue skies here in Washington, but they don't see the sun for around 350 days of the year. So you better hope it's not out on the night you're talking. But it is, and yet you are all still here, and I am grateful to you for that. River towns are winged towns, wrote Henry David Thoreau. I love that phrase. I live in a winged town, Cambridge. It's founded and named for and by and on its river, Cambridge, the bridge over the River Cam. Yours is a winged town, too. You've got the Willamette, you've got the McKenzie, you've got a flurry of others. Yours is winged as a flock of sandpipers, you lucky ducks. I envy your rivers. In another life, the counterfactual life, where I didn't live and teach and bring up my wonderful family in Cambridge, I'd have lived in the Pacific Northwest. It has my heart. Your rivers, your oceans, your mountains, your forests, they are spectacular. I live in a radically deforested landscape, which is so flat that you can fax it, as the old joke has it. I tell that joke to my students, and they just... they've out-evolved that joke. Bill Bryson visited Cambridgeshire, and he said, "It's great, you can stand on a chair and look into Norfolk." So this is a very other landscape to me, but it absolutely has my heart. Look, I want to start by naming the spirit who hovers over this evening, who's already been named. I've already had several conversations about him this evening. That's Barry Lopez, of course. It's 40 years this year since Arctic Dreams was published. It's 10 years this year since Barry gave, I think, the inaugural Upstream lecture. It's 50 years this year since Of Wolves and Men was published. It's 6 years since he died. It's 7 years since I met him. And long before he even knew I existed, Barry was my lodestar. He was, simply put, the writer who made me a writer. He broke open for me what nonfiction could be and could do, and that glitter, that lapidary glitter of his prose was accompanied by that fierce ethical sense that lit up the landscapes and the people he spoke of and the readers he spoke to. I met him finally in Portland in 2019, and I wrote about that encounter later in an essay called Geography as Generosity. I won't ever forget his kindness to me then, even though he was suffering from stage 4 cancer and was soon, though he didn't know it then, to lose his house to the wildfire that leapt the ridge and roared down on the property there on the McKenzie. He gave me this object at that meeting. It's a ventifact. That means a stone that's been, or any object that's been shaped by wind. He'd picked it up, he told me, in Antarctica decades earlier. And he pressed it into my hand, and I took it back, and it sits on my writing desk. Alien, xenolithic, rhomboid, smooth, so smooth. I touch it often. He put that in my hand. He spoke to me clearly and urgently about what he saw coming for this country and for the world, much of which has since come to pass. He told me to embrace fearlessly the burning world. I had a very strong sense of him passing on a responsibility to me as a writer, as he was doing to other writers, which I have since sought to meet, and I know I always will. So the stone sits here as proxy and vector and memory of Barry's presence, and tomorrow I'll head out along the McKenzie and visit his land for the first time, see his grave, pay my respects. He wrote much of rivers, as those of you who know his work will know, and one of the river remarks of his that has flowed most widely in the earth is that to place your hands in a river is to feel the cords that bind the earth together. And before I came here this evening, habit of mine, it seems a courtesy when one turns up in a strange city to make the acquaintance of its river as an early act. So I headed down with my friend Wayne, with whom 2 days ago I climbed Mount Hood in the cold, hard dark of this universe of ours under a full blue moon at the outermost extent of its orbit from the Earth that was lensed by the humidity as it built over the course of the dawn so that it squished into an egg shape. It was tinged by the sun as it rose so that it turned from blue to orange. And Wayne and I went to the river today, greeted it. I immediately felt awed by it and welcomed by it. I put my hands into it and felt the chords that bind the earth together. And that's chords with an H and chords without an H. The harmonies that unify and the ties that bind. So, from there on the bank, let me leap into the currents of this evening. I have a lot to say and a lot I want to ask you all. A question to begin with, a hard question, it's up there. Is a river alive? Is a river alive? All right, well, I was going to take a poll. Let's take it now. Okay, I'm going to do as well as I can in the darkness here. Those of you who would answer yes to the question, is a river alive? Raise your hand now. Well, now, my work here is done. I'm off. I'm not going to ask those who would answer no to raise their hands, given the overwhelming majority, as the pollsters put it. But I will say that it's wonderful to hear that confident assent. I asked my son this question when he, in the way children do, feigned interest in what their parents are up to. What's the title of your book, Dad? Well, is a river alive? Well, duh, that's going to be a short book, Dad. The answer is yes. Well, the McKenzie Trust, the River Trust, has been working, I know, with this concept of the living river for 2 decades or more now. And that phrase has gathered and gained resonance with other iterations and versions of that notion and that idea around the world. And it seems to me that how we answer this strange and confronting question really matters now, and that even the asking of it is a first step. And while I long for the answer to the question to be as easy, as simple as my son, found it to be at the age of 9, I know that in practice it is not. To answer yes to the question for those of us raised on rationalism requires unlearning often, and unlearning is much harder to do than learning. It requires tracing and embracing an alternative tradition of thought to that which has deep-coded so many of our institutions and our ways of seeing and being in the world. That tradition we might call the Enlightenment, the alternative tradition we might call the Enlivenment tradition. It requires remembering that a scant 0.00002% of the world's water flows in the world's rivers, yet they have been vital, fragile accomplices to human flourishing in the Holocene. They were life forces before they were resources, and they continue to be. It requires remembering in part that rivers and water systems are the vascular systems of the land, and that in their fractal and branching organization into capillaries and arteries, they reproduce the human circulatory system at scale with uncanny symmetry and sympathy. I work with a digital art collective called, truly, Marshmallow Laser Feast. And one of their founders is genuinely called Barney. I asked Barney and Marshmallow Laser Feast to develop some images for us this evening that could help us better envisage this network of river arteries and stream capillaries that support the life of the Pacific West. So let's see if we can begin to do that. So here is the world, thank you Barney, thank you Marshmallow Laser Feast, seen only as rivers and their watersheds. Here, then, zooming in, is, well, this continent of yours, most of it, much of it, and a few other places besides, again, seen only as rivers and watersheds. Zooming in then and changing the lens a little, here is a height relief map of the Pacific West, and here you can see played out, harrowed in chiaroscuro, the ancient conversation that has gone on between rivers and mountains for millions of years. I find this very beautiful, and you can, of course, see the volcanoes down there in a line. And then just beginning to move in a little bit, you'll be able to place yourself within your own watershed on this map. That, I think I'm right in saying this is the Willamette, is that right, heading north here? Wait. Sorry, there's a little bit of wonk on the light. I was aiming here. Okay. I'm going to let you illustrate that yourself in your minds, caption it correctly. And I'm going to bring us into that scale and let everybody locate themselves on this map. Look, if you still find it hard, and I know many of you here don't, to think of a river as alive, try and picture a dying river or a dead river. This is easier. We know what this looks like. We know how it feels. We speak more easily in English of dying rivers than we speak of living rivers. A dying river is one who doesn't reach the sea. A dying river has to be tested for pollutants by scientists wearing hazmat suits. On the upper Thames, west of London, swans now wear brown tide marks on their chest feathers where they've sailed through slicks of raw sewage. These are all images, recent images from my country, England, which is living, as some of you will know, through an absolutely desperate rivers crisis that has afflicted every river in England and Wales. There is not a single river in good overall health, only 14% in good ecological health, and 0% in good chemical health. Some of these rivers are dying, all of them are grievously wounded. One of them, who is dying, is the river who I live near in Cambridge, the little spring that rises on the chalk that Joe was referring to, and who flows into Hobson's Brook, who flows into the River Cam, who flows into the River Greatouse, who flows into the North Sea. In my island group, in certain parts, rivers have become first undrinkable, then unswimmable, and then untouchable. This should not be the case. How has it come to pass? There is a specific political story involving privatization, driven forwards as an ideological project late in the reign of Thatcherism. But it is also a crisis of imagination as well as one of legislation and financialization. There is a technocratic relationship with fresh water which has brought us miracles and upon which we depend, but which has also seen the dereliction and dilapidation of an imaginative and cultural infrastructure of relations with water. I speak of my country here, but this is a portable notion that can be read across with textural adjustments to many watersheds, I believe. Rivers are understood as resource, primarily. The Three Gorges Dam project. Oh, sorry, I just have to pause on this. So this is one of our privatized water companies that operate as regional monopolies, so we don't even get the benefit of capital competition. They have a registered trademark for the phrase water for life, which here emblazons itself upon a sign saying, please avoid contact with the water. If you've had contact with the water, please wash your hands for eating or drinking. Water for life. The Three Gorges Dam on the Yangtze River, an astonishing, titanic feat of human engineering, has now impounded so much water that it has measurably slowed the rotation of the Earth. This is an extraordinary, extraordinary fact, a gong strike of recognition about our ability as world-shaping Anthropocene forces to move land, to move water. What a curious forgetting it is, this disenchantment, this amnesia. We are all water bodies. Our brains, our hearts, your brains, your hearts are 3/4 water. Your skin is 2/3 water. Even your bones are watery. We are all participants in the water cycle. Rivers irrigate our bodies, our languages, our stories, our ways of speaking and living and loving and remembering. Every one of us lives in a watershed. In Aotearoa, New Zealand, you may know that it's good practice to greet somebody by asking ko ai koe, which translates roughly across as, who are your waters? What's being asked for is not your name, but rather your identity as told through relations with place, your rivers, your mountains, your ancestors, your memories, the mountains who ground you, the rivers who water you, who and not which, because pronouns matter greatly, and in my view we should who a river just as we who a human person. In my view also river is a verb and not a noun. Well, a brief moment of audience participation now. We've already had one, but now we have the second, and I'm pleased to tell the people on the front row that it involves interpretive dance. Did you not get there? Okay. No, you're fine. Rest easy, my friends. I want to ask you all a version of that question. Who are your rivers? Who are the rivers who have flowed through your lives, past and present, the ones you've returned to, traveled along, fallen in love with, fallen in love alongside? Here's one of mine. Those little springs I mentioned, which are now on life support, they literally have a heart pump in the form of what's called a groundwater pump that's fitted, which draws water from further down the system and forces it into the earth near the springs so that the springs keep flowing, because the combination of water table decline and climate excessive abstraction means the springs would die without that heart pump. Here's another, the River Dee, the young Dee, wonderfully vigorous and beautifully green, just a few miles old here, where it's tumbled off the Cairngorm Mountains in northeast Scotland, where I'll be in a couple of weeks. So I'd like to ask you to close your eyes in a second and to keep them closed, just for 1.5 minutes, with all the force you can muster. I'd like you to summon into your mind's eye and ear and nose, because we smell rivers as well as hearing them and seeing them, and we touch them as well. I want you to summon a river place, a place that answers the question, who are your rivers? Try to conjure it in your mind in detail, the sound, the scents, the textures, the birds, its currents, how you move in relation to it and it to you. So I'll do the same. And we close our eyes now and summon that river into your mind. Okay, and awake. Now I'd like you to just turn to the person next to you. Could you just name the river, whatever name you have for it? Just share a few words about it. Just take 30 seconds and tell the person next to you who your river is. Okay. I feel for the second time this evening my work here is done, but I'm still atoning for the river error earlier, so I'll stay on stage a little longer. How lovely to hear that hubbub, that susurrus of river talk rising from the room. What's a group noun for rivers? A watershed? Yes. A braiding, I sometimes think of rivers braid. You were braiding rivers there this evening. There was a lovely moment when I opened my eyes just before you all did, and I could see and also not see this amazing confluence where water comes together with other water. In my mind, those are holy places, says Raymond Carver in a poem he wrote up on the Olympic Peninsula. That's what this felt like here. There was a confluence. 6 years ago, almost exactly, I made the first notes towards a book about ideas of life, and I jotted 3, to me, provocative questions down quickly in a notebook. Does a forest think? Can a mountain remember? And is a river alive? They've all proved good questions with which to spend time, and perhaps I'll return to the first 2 in the future. Perhaps they've always been with me, but it was the third that wouldn't let me go and plucked at my sleeve and puzzled me and drew me onwards. And in the end, I spent the best part of 4 years in pursuit of answers to this still, to me, enigmatic question. And that journey took me to places in the world where rivers are being imagined in radically different ways to the resource paradigm. It brought me into contact with scores of brave and visionary people, lawyers and judges and scientists and activists and community leaders who are working to try to redefine the ways rivers are perceived and treated, who are working to redefine life itself. I saw extraordinary, courageous acts of river guardianship, and I saw people brought back from within the shadow of the valley of death by the healing powers of flowing fresh water, sometimes clearly, sometimes complexly. I made 3 long river journeys to regions where rivers have become a focus for revolutionary thinking about what the philosopher Michel Serres calls the natural contract. In each of these places, rivers are understood in some way to be alive. In each of these places, also, rivers are under a threat of death from consecutively mining, pollution, and damming. First of these journeys was to an Ecuadorian cloud forest, which is also a river forest because rivers are a cloud forest maker, and cloud forest are river makers by a process beautifully known as continuous fog drop. If I ever found a microbrewery or begin a mellow punk rock band, it'll probably be called Continuous Fog Drop, but anyway, you heard that here first. This is what being in a cloud forest looks like, probably not unlike some of your extraordinary temperate rainforests on this coast when the mist comes in. I sometimes liken it to being miniaturized and dropped into a patch of moss. Life here grows epiphytically, life upon life upon life upon life. It is a place of hyperlife. I have never been in a place with more endemic species, with more diversity, with more abundance. The neotropical Andes, particularly on the Pacific side, are statistically some of the most alive places on the planet right now. The forest shouldn't exist. It was under threat of annihilation from an alliance of gold mining companies, the state Ecuadorian mining company Enami, and a Canadian speculative mining firm called Cornerstone. And that should have been that. It's a powerful alliance. Gold, as we know, is formidably valuable now. It was then, though it's a quarter of the price it now attracts per troy ounce. The didn't die, and its rivers, the forest didn't die, and its rivers did not perish with it because of these remarkable articles. These are Articles 71 to 74 of the Ecuadorian Constitution, which were inserted during an act of, again, radical moral reimagination of the governing blueprint of a state. There's a story about how those articles came to be in that constitution, but Ecuador has consistently and continues to pioneer ways of managing, adapting, and innovating what we might call political ecology. I find it moving and awesome, and this is one of the ways in which they have done that. So the substance of these articles is complex, but in short, nature is a fellow subject. It has standing legally, it has rights, and a citizen who sees those rights as likely to be infringed has the right to bring a case within the Ecuadorian legal system on behalf of nature. That happened. It ascended up the court system and eventually ended up in the Constitutional Court. And in November 2021, a remarkable ruling, 126-page piece of jurisprudence, which is the closest thing law comes to poetry, in my mind, was issued by the Constitutional Court. And it comes very close, I should say. And its force was immense. It compelled the mining companies to leave within 10 days. The forest survives, the rivers survive. And so here we see moral imagination given legislative form, resulting in, as it were, no change on the ground. It's better to prevent a harm happening than to try to remedy that harm after it has occurred. I should say that it's really dangerous to be a land and a water defender in Ecuador. I've been to countries, Mexico, I'm involved with work in Mexico, India, which will come on to Ecuador, where death is a very real outcome for defending land and water. That can also be the case elsewhere, but it is worth remembering some of the risks that people, and particularly frontline indigenous communities in Latin American contexts, take. The second journey I made was to the rivers and the creeks and the lagoons and the estuaries of Chennai in southeast India. And there, rivers barely endure for most of the year. They are river ghosts. And then, at times, they return monstrously in the form of monsoon flood, cyclone flood, devastatingly visiting their harm almost entirely upon the poor of that immense city. Rivers are forgotten, and then rivers remember there. This is the state of one of the city's central water bodies, as you can see. So in this water body, 0% dissolved oxygen, 0 species count within the water itself. This is close to ecologically dead as water can get. It does get a sluicing and a flushing when the monsoon comes, but it's really, really hard there. You can see the pollution line here. This is really bad water meeting pretty bad water in the north of the region, a region called Yeno Creek, which was, when it became inconvenient to the legislators of the state, they simply erased its presence from the state maps. They just disappeared a river. And while I was there, I was working with this extraordinary group of young people led by my dear friend here, Juven Alves. Yes, that is a snake he's holding. And these are people who are trying, in the face of real danger, from state and non-state actors, in the face of almost unimaginable structural obstacles, to resurrect a just water culture, to imagine a future for people and rivers and creatures in that world where humans have lived and thrived by rivers for getting on for 1.5 million years, humans and proto-humans, but where this huge water amnesia has now taken hold. The third journey then was to the interior of Nitassinan, the Innu nation, which we might know more commonly here as Quebec. And this river, the Magpie River in English Quebecois, is known in Innu as the Mutehekau Shipu, the Muteshekau Hipu. There are variant pronunciations and various variant translations, but one of them, the one that is used by the people, the Innu people of the small township of Equaniche near the mouth of the river, is the river who flows between square, blocky cliffs. It really does. It rises near the Labrador border. It flows south on over those ancient sloping rocks of the Canadian Shield for more than 100 miles through roadless boreal forest. It reaches the Gulf of St. Lawrence somewhere near Anticosti Island if you can imagine that. And in 2021, the same year as that remarkable judgment was handed down by the Constitutional Court in Ecuador, this river became the first in Canada to have its rights declared in a dual resolution, what's called a mirror resolution. It was, and here is how rivers can help alliances be built between unlike communities with some very difficult histories, issued jointly in English and in French by the Mingan Regional Council, and here by the Innu Council, Conseil des Inuits de Equanicht. And this declaration, which has a complex purchase and absence of purchase within Canadian law, but is not by any means purely symbolic. Not that the purely symbolic strips it of power, because performativity of declaration is one way to create space, to imagine a future otherwise, and then build that future into the braced space that is held by the performative. So these rights were declared. The river was recognized as a legal person and a living entity, the bearer of fundamental rights, including the right to flow. This was in the face of the overbearing presence of Hydro-Quebec, who had the river in its sights for a multi-dam complex. And I spent time in the region, and one of the people I met there was this extraordinary woman, Rita Mestcocho, who is one of the great poets of this continent. She writes in Innu and in French. She's a community leader, language keeper, writer, activist. She sees no particular distinction between these roles. They are all folded into her and continuous with one another. If you have French, I urge you all to seek out any of her work, but her most recent collection, Atiku Utai, is the Innu title. In French, it's Le Cœur du Caribou, the heart of the caribou. I went to Rita first to ask her for permission to descend the river. She was like, yeah, sure. You can have my permission, but you need the river's permission. I was like, oh, that sounds like a paperwork nightmare. What do? Do I apply in triplicate? How does this work? She was like, what you need to do is not think so much with your head and not look so much with your eyes, and also not take your notebooks on the river. And I was like, the first two I can get with Rita, but like as a writer, the third of those just strikes to the heart. So we came to a negotiated settlement whereby I could write when I wasn't actually on the water, but only when I was by it. So, yeah, Jesuit equivocation served me well in that conversation. She gave me, and Wayne, my friend and companion on the river, who's here tonight, as you've heard, a series of very clear instructions about how to behave on and with the river. And she also told me that we could each ask one question of the river, and if it was the right question, the river would answer it. I thought, shoot. That's tough. One question. Better make it a good one. Better make it the right one. And I didn't know what that question was until late in that time, and then I did, and the river answered it formidably. And so we were dropped, 5 of us, by float plane about 100 miles up the system, and then over series of very, very intense days, we paddled the huge lake, 75-kilometer lake that separates the upper from the lower river. Camping along the way, we moved through in kayaks, individual kayaks, through situations like this, utterly thrilling. You can be buried by water as well as by stone, and we were over and over again. And we moved from the northern tip of the lake down to the silver green seamouth. This is Wayne. I don't know what to call it, really. Being licked by a tongue of the river, let me put it like that. As I recall, things didn't go brilliantly shortly after that photograph was taken, but it's an extraordinary image nevertheless. We camped by rapids, which gauzed the water, and we looked over these immense falls that stutter the river towards its ending. And we suffered the sanguineous attention of black flies. I've given given a lot of my blood to the Scottish midge over the years. I've been a generous donor. I thought the midge was bad. I thought it knew everything about B-movie attack formations. But the black fly just says to the midge, hold my beer. I do have Wayne's permission to show what you're about to see, which happened shortly after the first attack wave of the black flies. I remember when the first one landed on my hand, I said something like, "Is this the notorious black fly?" What a fool. So this is the same person in each photograph. So this is Wayne just after the bites have gone in. Foolishly, he's allowed one to remain on his fringe there, but anyway. It looked like he'd been stitched by a small handheld machine gun. They have a highly effective anticoagulant, as you know, so they take a lot of mopping up. And then the histamine reaction kicks in. I think this is Wayne the next morning. His eyes were so swollen the next morning that we couldn't actually begin paddling because he couldn't see the river until he'd spent about half an hour massaging them. Thank you, my friend. Black flies can kill mules. Did you know that? Yeah. That river journey, coming atop the other river journeys I'd made over those years, it shook me out and it turned me upside down and it made me more aware of the infinitesimal fathoming of this world's mysteries that I've made in decades of trying to take its soundings, and it was among the most metaphysically and physically turbulent times I've ever been involved in, and slowly the river wore away the usual shells of perception and reason, and it left me exposed to what occurred a day short of the sea at a site known simply as the Gorge, where the immensity of that river was funneled between two vast jaws of rock to form a throat, a gorge of white water, eau vivant, living water, which had a tongue and which spoke, and which was the point and the place to which it turned out everything had always been flowing. And there, in ways I'm still far from being able to comprehend, after days and years and minutes on the flow and in it, I had the unmistakable sense not only of writing with the river, but far more strangely and unsettlingly of being written by the river. And there and then I did know what question to ask of the river, and it answered it resoundingly. I'm going to draw things to a close, and I just want to say a few words about hope to do so, and then Karrin and I will join in conversation. So I'm just going to jump past these remarkable female leaders of environmental river-based progress who've been rewarded with the Goldman Prize, the Nobel Prize for Environmental Activism over recent years, who are absolute heroes in my mind. And I'm going to pause here on the remarkable guardianship movement that has sprung up in my country in the face of, because of, despite of the crisis. Joe spoke earlier to some of you about hopium, this kind of dismissive notion that hope is a sort of delusionary bromide that we get high on and distracts us from the complexities of the doom that approaches or the intractability of the given world. I haven't seen that in my years, my river years. I've seen the opposite. I've seen hope as a discipline. I have seen people using hope to turn attention into intention, into action. I am in the right part of the world to speak of disciplined hope, of hope as a verb with its sleeves rolled up. You've all just heard of the work, seen the work of the McKenzie River Trust. What a time for me to be here after the breaching of the levee and the restoration of process to that extraordinary, immense wetland. We're just a few hours north of the Klamath River, of course, the biggest de-damming initiative in US history, overtaking the Elwha. Here you can see the river beginning to re-find its way through the newly surfaced land there. A week ago, almost exactly, I was up on the Elwha, a river I'd long dreamed of seeing on the Olympic Peninsula. Prior to the Klamath, the biggest de-damming project in US history, I was deeply moved to see that watershed recover and that enlivenment that a healthy, living, pulsing river emanates from itself. As you will know, salmon knock on the door. They just keep knocking on the door. It's what they've done. They don't just knock on human dams. They've knocked on landslides. They've knocked on beaver dams. It's what they do. They keep coming back. They knock on the door. If the door's closed, they go away. They come back the next year. They knock on the door again. And one year, this year, when the Klamath Iron Gate Dam came down, the door was open, and they went through. And within 3 days, the first Chinook salmon was caught on a sonar heading upstream. And within a month, 6,000 salmon had migrated up into the upper watershed. Barry McKenzie, senior fisheries biologist for the Yurok tribe, put it beautifully. The river is healing itself, and the agency there is the rivers. And Amy Bowers-Cordalis, who's the lawyer and negotiator for the Yurok tribal nation, who's written a wonderful, wonderful book about the Klamath restoration. She was there as the river slid through to meet itself on the far side of the wreckage of the Iron Gate Dam. When the water reconnected with itself, I could feel its vibrancy. I could feel its pulse. So to end, as someone from outside this region, from outside this continent, someone who spent 5 years following rivers, river ideas, river stories worldwide, I invite us all to celebrate and nest the river work that's underway transformatively in this watershed, the work of compassion, of community, connecting places to places, people to places, people to people, people to more than human people, within this wider set of river guardianship movements and actions, within a wider geography of hope, to borrow John Muir's phrase, in which rivers are recognized as the living and vibrant actors in the great drama of life on this beautiful and fragile planet we are fortunate briefly to inhabit. As fellow subjects with whom our human fate flows, and always has. Thank you very much. Now I think Karrin's going to join me on stage. Is there a mayor in the house? There is. Hi. Should I sit here?
Thank you. Make sure you can hear me. There it is. There it is. I can see some of you. I'm tied up with my pen, still taking notes. Robert.
Hello.
Hi. Oh, my goodness. Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for taking us on these journeys. Thank you for allowing us to join you on this journey. Thank you for the journey that was reading this book and being introduced to your work. And I will just say that the visual information that you shared with us about the language, the poetry, the feeling, it is immense. And as you were speaking, I was reflecting on the fact that so much of what is in my mind is about how we connect that immense and expansive experience to what each of us is experiencing, and how we feel truly a part of that and connected, and move beyond awe to something that is a deeper type of connection. And you write about it so beautifully in this book. And it's not often that you have a chance to talk with an author of a work that you've really loved reading, so thank you.
Thank you
for
so
that.
much. It's lovely. Really
I have too many notes. We won't have time. We won't have time to talk about everything. I would say the conversation will continue. But I would like, because this event is so extraordinary, and there's a river that runs through Upstream, and you shared with us some of your connection to Barry Lopez and the meaning of that connection. I love that you have a relic of your relationship
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that is also an example of
I'll keep
like
it with us.
landscape time.
Yeah.
Now he's with us, and so much more. And I'm just wondering two things, because in this book you also mention Robin Wall Kimmerer
Yep.
and the grammar of animacy and thinking about our relationships to the world and how language connects our understanding. And so I have questions for you about each of those authors and your relationships to their work, but I'm wondering if you could begin by sharing with us a little bit about a persisting first memory of Barry Lopez that allowed for him to break you open. How does that happen?
Oh, it's a lovely, generous question. Barry was such a generous man, as I've heard, as I've heard several times from those who knew him this evening. Well, two quick memories for Barry. The other person who we haven't mentioned is, I step into giant shoes here, Barry, Robin Wall Kimmerer, and I think Rebecca Solnit. Who has been a friend of mine inexplicably to me in my fortune for 20 years. So there is a lovely web that weaves with these other writers, and I feel very happy to be in relation with them here tonight. Two thoughts about Barry. One is that I came home from picking my son, I think it was, up from school, maybe 12, 15 years ago. I don't think Barry Lopez knew who I was. I certainly knew who he was because he was my lodestar. I opened the door of my home in Cambridge, and on the mat was an envelope, and Barry was very particular about typing on his Olivetti typewriter. He typed my name and my address, and then on the outside it was one of those American envelopes, I think I can say that, I'm sure other countries do it too, that has the name and the address of the sender on the outside. I could not have been more amazed if I had opened the door to find a rattlesnake on my mat. It was inexplicable to me that my God had written to me at my home. And it was at once a very loving and a slightly stern letter. He wanted to correct me on a couple of things, not the river thing, but also to extend the possibility of a correspondence. Correspondence flowered and flourished over the years. And then I finally met him, and the other, I suppose, memory I would share is that I was so nervous. This was 2019. It really was like, it was like meeting a superhuman, and it was an overdetermined encounter for me because he'd been such a figure in my life for so long and so consequential, and I was so nervous. And he had brought an atlas. And with it, after we'd greeted each other, he sat down, he just opened the atlas on the table, and he said, "Show me your places." And I can feel it now, this enormous weight of worry falling away from me, and I could lean into the map, show him my places, the stories that flowed from them, ask him, and we were off. And that was Barry. Geography is generosity.
Beautiful. And we all have our places.
Yeah, we all have. We heard that tonight with the hubbub.
And here, and far.
Yeah.
Robin Wall Kimmerer has also been a part of the Upstream
Yeah.
watershed.
Yep.
And the way that this book connects to an introduction to an idea of thinking about not just the subjects of the world
Yes.
and subjectifying, but the animate and the inanimate.
Yeah.
And how our choice of language and our decisions about language say
Yes.
so much about how we understand.
Yes.
Your language is so specific, so beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
and your choice of words, but also just the attentiveness, the attention that you're paying. I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about the connection between that attentiveness to the world and what Robin Wall Kimmerer spoke to about animacy and the aliveness of the world.
Yes. Yes. So Robert Macfarlane has this phrase, the grammar of animacy, which has become such a generative notion. And in short, it is that, broadly speaking, English is an itting language. It's an objectifying language. If grammar is, at some level, the sedimentation and lithification of ways of relating to, seeing, being with, knowing the world, language itself in practice is the river frothing along, but grammar is the bedrock that the river runs on and that therefore shapes the surface of it. In English, we it, we that, we which rivers. Nature is always an it. It's objectified. Life is sometimes denied it in the presumptions of grammar. And so Robin says, well, and she gives the example of Potawatomi, which is the language she herself is trying to speak because she's a citizen of that nation. And she says, well, bay in Potawatomi is a verb. And then she says, actually, the density and preponderance of verbs is immense in this language because it is a language of process, of flow, of being in action, rather than a language of nouns, of solidity, of unit, and arguably of separation. And it is amazing to me that river in English is a noun, and that we almost never use river as a verb. And so one way, super paraphrase of the book is understanding river as a verb and not as a noun. And it does, that. And then the only other thing I'd say is that language has incredible animating powers. We've all read novels which make us fall in love with people who have never lived, or grieve people who have died, who never lived except as ink and paper. And if it can do that, I thought, well, surely I can draw on some of that to help animate and enliven the idea of river for people for whom river is noun, for whom river is object.
And to be rivered.
To be rivered.
And to be rivered in a present tense.
Yes, exactly.
Which is a fascinating way of thinking about how to move through the world and to be informed by the world.
Yep.
When we were first chatting a few weeks ago, I was deeply moved by the ways in which your descriptions spoke of a life experience that is unique to you as a human, being shaped by the landscapes, by the relationships, by the experiences, that you were like a river, a microcosm of the river, and yet at the same time, your work is doing so much to help us understand how we are all a part and all connected in that experience. And it is not that often in current times that we have the time, or we give the time, to really thinking about that experience of being both the smallest example and all of the carving and eroding and barriers and waterfalls of our lived experience, but then also being connected to something that is universal.
Yeah.
It's shared among every living experience and not just human experience.
I agree. And exactly, I mean, I just happen to have written my stuff down. but all of you are rivered. And we saw that and we heard that today. My oldest son the other day, he was like, Dad, when are you going to write your memoirs? I was like, I've been writing my memoirs for 20 years, dude. You just haven't read any of them. So, I just happen to have written it down. But I think I mentioned to you when we spoke a couple of weeks ago, this Sherwood Anderson, the novelist, American novelist, this quote. Yeah, great. There's no name recognition for Sherwood Anderson in England, so it's great to be in a place where a few people are like, woo! Wallace Stegner in the Wilderness Letter quotes Sherwood Anderson, and I think the phrase he quotes is a sense of the bigness outside ourselves. And that, rivers do that to us, mountains do that to us. They expand the range the self has to move in. They constellate us into patterns of relation with others. And, it's so easy. We all know this. The hustle and the bustle and the beat and the need and the greed of everyday life kind of turns us in on ourselves and makes us these little units, and we build the shells that hold us in but also hold us apart. And then sometimes we meet something, maybe a river, maybe the wind in the trees, maybe the way a memory is made with place and of place, that just cracks the shells a little bit and opens us. And that's, I think we long for that. And we long for it probably now more deeply and hungrily than ever before. Does that, I mean, you're a runner, you're a climber, you're a river person, you grew up in Alaska. Do you feel that, a sense of the shells and the cracks?
I think especially when you were describing earlier the work of the Trust with many incredible partners in this last week as a moment, but over years, that longing. And I think that it is an example of something where we can feel that personally, that desire for the reconnection. When you write about the reticulation, and oftentimes in the world, when we speak about things that we are familiar with in our cities and communities, we talk about networks, but really we're talking about segments.
Wow.
A collection of segments, but not really networks of things. They don't have the resilience and the diversity of that type of experience. And that's what I think about when you frame it back that way. That there is a sense of longing that goes with that breaking through, and also of, I don't want to say rightness, because that presumes that there was a wrong, but a very natural way of being. And I think of what's happening on the coast, that now to be seen as the most natural of occurrences, but humans had a really important role to play in that opportunity, that restoration of aliveness.
And humans in a network, not humans in segments, and it takes time. I think rivers, I've seen it in my country, rivers have this extraordinary power to, let's say, and here's the agency goes back to rivers here, to grow networks around themselves. We talk about river guardianship, but the rivers are our guardians too, and they're acting upon us. And I watch these extraordinary, I mean, we have a toothless regulator, we have a fully privatized water system in England and Wales. Only Chile is the only other country in the world that has a fully privatized water system, so we're highly anomalous. The UN Special Rapporteur on the human right to clean water singled England out for special criticism for the privatization system. And we also have a drastically, and I would say strategically underfunded, what's called the Environment Agency, which is our national regulator, monitor, etc. And into the gap left by state, let us say, has risen local state, council level, city level, often watershed level initiatives, including a whole bunch of really interesting and active rights charters and declarations that are starting to build and also starting to work out what does it actually mean to do this, how can we do this best, how can we inspissate it into existing structures of governance and regulation and legislation. And then these amazing citizen science networks who are testing rivers up and down their length, coming up with incredible data sets that are just so much more than the Environment Agency can produce. And then, rapid response citizen units, WhatsApp groups. Like, I love it. Humans are incredible. When we hope for something, when we want something to be better, we organize, we network, and it's absolutely thrilling to see. And I'm wholly confident that in 20 to 30 years, which in my experience now is the unit of change, we will have a thriving river system again in England, or a system that is tending towards thriving, and that feels exciting. I wish it didn't have to be so, but it feels exciting to see what we can do. you called it working in community?
Working in community.
Yeah, which is not prepositions interest me a great deal.
It's a bit like being in the river.
Yeah.
In the mountains instead of on the river or on
Right.
the mountains.
So is that why? That's why? Is it? I don't know if it's your phrase or a regional phrase, but that's what it means. It's that immersion.
I think it's a way that we speak of working alongside, leading from the side, the ways in which you move together with community. I think in reading your work, I was reminded of some of the wisdom from some of our local tribal partners, and we tend to really hustle. We tend to rush along in our culture a lot. And the indigenous wisdom to move at the speed of the slowest, rather than to move on as soon as you're ready as an individual. And that, I think there's a lesson in that for us that will be continuously relearned.
Yeah.
We do not have as much time as we need, but I want to ask you one more question.
What? One more?
I know, but it comes back to where we started, and I cannot wait to read your book about a mountain and remembering.
Okay.
Because that is my oldest spiritual connection with the natural world. But I want to ask you, and also quote back to you, something that connects to what you mentioned about the innovation, innovating political ecology.
Yeah.
And you're so attentive, you're so descriptive, and you engage with such care in your work. And there's a moment when you observe in Is a River Alive a sort of question of how can you come to communicate with an ocean when you can't even talk with each other?
Yeah.
And I'm just curious if you have any advice.
Wow. Well, first thing to say is that line I'm quoting from Stanislav Lem's great science fiction novel Solaris, which many people here will have seen film adaptations of, all of which Lem disliked because he thought that they focused on the human rather than the ocean. And some of you will have read the novel. And it is an attempt to kind of comprehend what seems to be an ocean planet in which the ocean itself is a sentient presence. Nobody can get onto the planet, so there's a whole kind of set of protocols for trying to understand what sentience might be in something so radically other as water. Sentience in dogs, let's say, yes. Plants, it starts to retreat further, become more complex, distributed cognition, no centralized brain. Fungal networks, we're way out. Water, wow. Where do we even begin with the notion of a river as sentient? But then I think the real core of that book is that line. How can we hope to open a plausible line of communication with an ocean when we cannot even communicate with one another? I think, I mean, you've amazed me in our short acquaintance with the clear integrity and care with which you are building community in this city as an individual and as the network that grows from you and of which you are part. We see it in the River Trust, in the people here tonight. This is network in action. This is watershed in action. And I was asked a very interesting version of this question earlier this evening, and I didn't quite understand the question when it first came. And then I said, well, if we can't understand what water is saying, that doesn't stop us from listening to water. And I think that spending time with rivers, meeting rivers, being on them, being together with them, and allowing them to be present as, let us say, neighbors in our lives as individuals, as polities, as citizens, feels to me deeply important. And When I lost a friend too young a year and 3 months ago, I went to my little spring and I sat with the spring. I didn't say anything, but that was where I wanted to be at that time. That was the companion I wanted and I needed, and I listened, and I was listening with water as well. It was no more profound or simple than any version of an experience like that so many people in this room will have had, but we forget that neighborliness and that conviviality and that companionship at our peril, I think. So being together with one another and listening with water seems to me good work.
Mm-hmm. It's the functional ecology
Functional
that we all seek to
ecology.
be a part of, absolutely. I think that we are near the end of our time today, and I'm going to invite Executive Director Chomo back up to the stage in just a moment. But Robert, I would be remiss if I did not say thank you for paying such close attention in the world and writing it down. Thank you for stretching your lifetime into other lifetimes. Thank you for helping us to see all of this in the flow and ourselves in the flow, and to be remembering that as ancestors we will always remain in that flow and we benefit from the others who are with us. It's really a joy to have you here in Eugene. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
You both mentioned that performative space, creating the space for creativity, for connection, and I think we've demonstrated that again tonight. I think if you've come here for a concert, if you've come here for a memorial, if you've come here for Upstream or one of the other speaking opportunities here, this space creates this. It's a space for imagination to just flourish. And I hope as you head home tonight and in the days ahead, you'll continue to talk about this with your friends and neighbors and peers, and just continue to spread that curiosity, because we need that imagination and curiosity. When you turn your phone back on, remember to look at the program, and if you're interested in being curious about more of the McKenzie River Trust and maybe would like to get out in the field with us and enter that raffle, please go to that QR code. Otherwise, thank you for coming, and good night.